Well, what does the Bible say? The Bible, I always go back to one of my favorite passages. It's not the most optimistic, 2 Timothy 3. And 2 Timothy 3, in the last days, men will be, and you'll fill in the blank, lovers of self, lovers of money, it goes on and on. People don't always realize that that passage is directed at the church, not so much at the world. It's directed at the church. And a part of that passage says that men will be ever learning but unable to come to a knowledge of the truth, that they will have a form of godliness but deny the power thereof. So here already that passage is in a sense foreshadowing what is happening as you and I speak today.
Very true. I encourage people to write that passage down and go and read it and look at it and really let it get into their hearts. 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 7. And verse 5 tells us that Paul is not describing the problems that will be around us in the world system.
That's right.
He makes it clear. He says, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. Now, that could be very correctly translated, having a form of the religion of Christ. Now, the secular world around us, that's not what he's dealing with, obviously. He's dealing with the church in the end times. And he makes it clear that we're not to see how we can dialogue with them, to see what parts of the liberal system might be okay or acceptable. He says, from such turn away. In other words, flee from them, run from them. I always tell people, if you don't run from people who claim to be Christians yet do not profess the Scriptures to be true and accurate and don't hold to the essential doctrines of the faith, if you don't get away from them, it'll get on you. You'll become a part of it. That's the way it works. That's what a Texas preacher once told me. If you don't run from that stuff, it'll get on you. And I agree completely with that. And you brought up verse 7, too. Verse 7 says, ever learning but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. And I think of how many people there are, and thank God for great, wonderful, godly, biblical seminary professors and college teachers who love God and love the Word of God. But you think of so many who have gotten into positions of power in our seminaries and Bible colleges. And I'm talking about the good Bible colleges, or at least the ones that once were not too long ago. Very good. And these are people who have allowed their intellect to overrule the truth of the Word of God and the Spirit's work in their lives. Let's never forget that Harvard, Princeton, and Yale were once great, sound theological institutions where the Word of God was preached. I don't think there's any honest evangelical today who would say that that's a place you'd want to send your children. It may be a place that has a Harvard and Yale, for example, and Princeton. They may have great reputations in the world, but I frankly would rather my children not be educated if they end up being unsaved and lose their souls for all eternity because of the education they get here on earth.
All right. Now, there's a big change between, a whole lot of them, between the 1880s and the 21st century. What we have going either for us and perhaps even against us today is that we have technology, we have communications that can spread truth and error literally at the speed of sound. It can travel overnight around the world, whereas in the 1880s it would take who knows how long for something false, or we move up into the 1920s when some of these major denominations were starting to fall apart. They did not have the communications that we have today. So we are seeing the deterioration take place within perhaps a decade instead of 100 years.
Oh, exactly. And that's the point I've been making as I've been traveling and speaking, is that the demise of modern evangelicalism and, frankly, fundamentalism around us, the demise that's taking place today will be much quicker because we have instant communications, the Internet, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And the heretics, and that's what we've got to call them. They're people who claim to be but are not accurate, are not real, are not authentic Christians. They will be able to network together and find support in one another and gain supporters by having the Internet and the way we can communicate with radio, TV, DVDs, et cetera today.
Right. Talking this hour with Eric Barger. You can learn more at his website, ericbarger.com. That's BARGER, ericbarger.com. And I opened up by saying that both he and I, and we did not anticipate getting into the area when we started in ministry, getting into some of the discernment issues that we are. In Eric's case, he was dealing heavily with the cults. Well, all of a sudden, we're dealing with the troubles within evangelical Christianity. Same with this ministry, Olive Tree Ministries. And if we look at the Bible, however, the Bible outlines, all the writers of the New Testament talk heavily about what is going to happen in the last days as it concerns some of the false things that are going on. And that people are going to be not giving heed to sound doctrine. We could give all sorts of reference verses that predict exactly what's going on. So I guess we really shouldn't be all that surprised, Eric. There are a couple of, there are new Bibles coming out all the time. I think that there's probably never going to be an end to the kind of trendy Bibles that are coming out. And I came across one recently. I actually wrote on it. It's called the Green Bible, endorsed by that stalwart of evangelicalism, Desmond Tutu, and a few others. And the Green Bible is printed on, of course, a politically correct brand of paper, etc. And, of course, the Bible itself is green. And then you were telling me the other day, Eric, that you came across the new Emergent Bible. It's called the Vision.
No, it's the Voice, James.
I meant the Voice. I'm sorry, I meant Voice. It's called the Voice. And you went into a bookstore, I think you said, and you were hoping that it would perhaps be sort of obscure and perhaps hidden a bit. And what did you find?
Well, I went into the bookstore. I called ahead to make sure they had a copy before I drove down, and I'm looking at the shelves behind.
Yeah.
There's kind of a counter in front of the Bible section, and I'm looking over that counter at the shelves behind, looking at the various Bibles back there, trying to spot it. And it turns out it was laying on the counter in a stack right in front of me on the counter. And I said to the gal when I picked it, when she pointed it out, I said, "Oh, I was hoping you'd have this under the counter, not on top." And she looked at me and didn't make a comment. And
well, she didn't get it, I'm sure.
No, I think she probably did, but she wasn't going to make any comment about my comment. And it's interesting that this particular Bible, the Voice, has a curious mix of people who I've had in the past some great respect for, and some that I believe are just blatant heretics as well. It's interesting, and I when I say the word heretic, I don't bandy that word around and just tag that on everybody I disagree with, because I think we can have genuine, honest disagreements about things, and as long as we still line up with the essentials in the Word of God, that I think that allows us to call one another brother and sister. But there are some people in this that are the mainline leaders inside, and when I use the word mainline, these are the standard names you hear around the emergent church movement, and yet there's some people who I've always thought were scholarly, and in the past, a couple of them I've really revered what they've said and the work that they've done. And so interesting, and as I've been going through this, even this morning before you and I got on the phone, I was kind of looking through it, looking for passages and so on, and found interesting passage, Revelation 22. Instead of it being a lake of fire, you're just left outside the gates.
Okay, this is in reference to hell.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's other places, and I decided to run that down a little bit and see where else hell might be used in this particular and I know what people are thinking. Oh, listen to these narrow-minded people. All they're looking for is hell. And that's not it. I just happened to be looking for that because I happened to run across a spot at the very end of the Scriptures, Revelation 22, that instead of the whoremongers and soothsayers and idolaters and adulterers being cast into the lake of fire, they're just left outside the gates.